So this is the agenda again, and our first talk by Dr. Alex Gellman. He will talk about RRSA methodologies and objectives, set the, the whole framework, how to progress. With that, Alex, I'm going to stop sharing my slide. If you can.
Okay. I can start this.
Yeah, so you may kindly just share the slides, and this is very important learning items from Alex, and he's going to let us know. If you have any question, somebody has raised hand. It can be brief. Ask the question. Nadir?
Yeah. My question is, at the last meeting, the monthly meeting, I asked about if there is shared depository where we share the contribution, presentation, or any material during this period.
We'll do that. Thank you. Yeah, we have a SharePoint, whatever. We're going to send it to all the Malindex members. If you have a question when Alex is, just raise your hand or put something in the chat box. So this is the time to ask any questions we have to Alex. Alex, please proceed if you're ready.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Alex Gellman. This is about like 20% of my IEEE involvement. The rest didn't fit. So what is it? I will be talking sort of for myself, and then for Rob-Fish and Mehmet were invited and couldn't attend. So I'm kind of encompassing here three objectives. One is to what Ashutosh just stated, is explaining to you about RRSA, but also about the IEEE SA standards development environment, and also try to some description of ecosystem in IEEE that allows to seduce researchers from academia and industry to develop standards in emerging technologies. So what is a desirable objective of an RRSA? And it's in an increasing priority. Very small letters are less important than very, very large characters. So we can address ORAN related standardization in IEEE, the vision, etc. That's the least desirable thing. We can develop a strategy. We can establish a roadmap, identify immediate and future standards opportunity. That's already kind of getting warm. Launch pre-standardization industry connections research projects from what we see today in ideas for standardization. Launch study groups. That's even closer because that's already under IEEE SA in some kind of in one of the appropriate standards committees. But the main reason the RRSA is ran is to propose PARs. To
Alex?
Yes.
Alex, were you planning to share your video, or because we don't see your video, that's all? Is your video on, camera on, or it's up to you? You want to put your camera on, or?
My camera is on, as far as I know. Just one second. I can make sure. On. Just one second.
Yeah.
Yes, my camera is on.
Yeah, it's on now. Yeah, it's on. Okay, all right. That's fine. Somehow, in the split screen, we don't see your...
okay.
That's fine. So please proceed. We'll fix on this side.
I'm going back to the show, the slideshow. So this is the real objective, is to propose PARs for an IEEE standards bona fide sponsor, the standards committee. So what is the governance structure for the standards development at IEEE? Standards Association is one of the major OUs. So there are the technical activities that everybody knows, educational activities, publication, geographic activities, and then Standards Association. It's a peer to those. So, and Standards Association has Board of Governors and has Standards Board. Board of Governors is the governing body that does a lot of things. It has standards. It has strategic committees, like there are 8 of them, but also it has a Standards Board, SASB, which is directly involved in governing the standards activities everywhere, including in societies and councils. And then there's a corporate advisory group. So now look on the right. the technical committees, the technical societies, they house standards committees. Not all technical societies, unfortunately, do standards, but those who do, they have standards committees with a limited scope, out of the part of the field of interest of the society. So these standards committees report directly to standards board. There's nobody between the sponsors and the standards board. They directly report to standards board. Anything that escalates, whatever it is, a complaint, an appeal, a problem, good news or bad news, go to the standards board. But society sets up these committees and sort of governs them, makes sure that they operate in a normal, they're vital and they operate in a normal environment, and guides them technically. So technical guidance comes from the societies. So the Standards Association is a SDO basically. It's an SDO, NC accredited SDO. And it's an open process. We are completely open. Our meetings are available to everybody. Everybody can join, gain voting rights. There are some restrictions, or rules actually. I wouldn't call them restrictions. They are rules for entity projects where one company, one vote. I'll talk about it a little bit later. But individual representation, they're much more open. Anybody can walk in. Doesn't matter how many people from the same company. They can participate and gain voting rights according to the P&Ps of specific working groups. So it's a global community. We are global, borderless SDO. People think we are a U.S. Organization. Well, we are and we are not. We are really international, even though accredited just in USA. But we have a footprint in all, basically, the countries where IEEE has a footprint. So the standards development process that is governed by Standards Association, it's a straightforward, common sense chain of events. You initiate a project, you create a working group, you have to get support for that project, right? Project has to be sustained, sometimes for years, sometimes for quite a few years. And so people have to be materially interested to sustain that project. You draft a standard within confinement of that working group and under the rules supplied by the IEEE SA. Then you ballot this standard and you get the final approval and you publish the standard. So on the left, you see the description of each of these stages, and there are appropriate committees listed that are involved in that. Don't worry about that complexity. It's not complex at all. And if you get to participate in the standards, you're a new joining a working group, you will be guided by your sponsor, your standards committee, and a very capable IEEE SA staff. So nothing to worry about. You will be guided all the way through. So as I said, the standard has to come from somewhere, right? So it has to be a support behind it, a group of people that has an idea, that identifies a standard committee where it fits. You can get help in doing that. You get a project approval, and you, okay, and you start working on a standard in the working group. You go to sponsor ballot, and you get an approval for the standard, and you publish. So it's just a graphic depiction of what I just told you there before. Now, but there is a life cycle. Standards have to be, with time, revised. Let's say it's 10 years. Sometimes people proactively revise it in 5 years because there's different dynamics in different industries and different dynamics in different technologies. And some standards need to be revised more often than others. And some standards have a life to live of maybe 10 or 20 years, and some standards may live forever, at least our lifetime. So after publication, the working group doesn't disappear forever. It can go dormant for a while, but then it has to come back, look at the standard, revise it, or just republish it as is. It needs to go to project approval again, so the cycle repeats itself. So there are individual and entity projects. So in the individual representation-based working groups, a lot of things are unique to IEEE because we are open, non-profit educational institution. So you can have multiple individual contributors from the same company. It's permitted. It's actually very good. But it doesn't mean that they will be voting in cahoots. They will be voting. The block voting is not allowed. Each individual can obtain voting rights, but they cannot be a team that votes together and conspires how to vote. No, they have to be individual contributors. Otherwise, that is a violation of our rules. The chair usually does not vote, so don't think that the chair is a dictator. No, he or she cannot vote unless break a tie. The chair can argue. It's not completely silent person. He can or she can argue technical positions, but needs to step down temporarily, and the vice chair steps in and runs the meeting, and then the chair becomes like everybody else and can be shut down by the vice chair. So the working group owns the contribution. The companies that contribute, they own their intellectual property, so they have to declare patents if they have patents, or somebody who knows that somebody has patents are obliged to declare them, to inform the group that there are patents somewhere in the world related to the discussion, to the standard, to the draft, and they have to issue, whoever the owners of the patent are, they have to issue the letters of assurance about non-discriminatory, reasonable and non-discriminatory policy. So the working group owns the contribution and can release it to the outside world as they see fit, and may not release it if they don't feel like doing it.
Alex, do you take questions now, or there is a raised hand?
Yeah, interrupt me anytime.
So Jen, can you please go ahead and ask your question? Jen, I see your hand raised. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, speak a little loudly. Yeah, go ahead.
My question is, in respect to the question asked yesterday on the chat, how fast is 4G to 5G network in transmission, configuration, consolidation, and all that, where network is suitable? And the answer is 5G is higher and faster. Now, having 5G network in place in my country, Nigeria, and we are running all these transmission, consolidation, configuration using network. How effective and reliable is the cybersecurity in place? Is there any programmed software design that can flash or show or indicate that a cyber attack is coming in any of the systems, whether server, cloud, or IVED, VIVAS we are using for electoral work?
Right. So
Okay.
Jen, I can address. Alex, you want to address that? Because I think the question is a little bit on 5G benefits compared to 4G and implementation and others. I'll just briefly comment. At this specific meeting, we are trying to address the Open RAN standardization and best current practice, how to standardize. But just to address briefly, there are other initiatives within IEEE, for example, the Future Network Initiative. If you can send me an email, I'll plug you into the right working group. And there are various other activities around 5G, how it is better than 4G, the panel talks, so we can share that with you, Jen. Alex, you would like to comment on that?
No, I think you should hook her up with your security group. I mean, that's the right group, I think, because the focus of the question is in security.
Jen, I will share my email address. Kindly send any queries to me, and I'll plug it to the right group. Thank you.
Okay, so there are entity also. There are individual groups and entity groups. In individual, everybody represents themselves. They come from a company, but they basically represent themselves. They owe their allegiance to the working group, and they participate as an individual contributor. Now, in a entity projects, one company, one vote. So one designated representative has a vote, votes on behalf of that entity, on behalf of that company. Chair has to be a designated representative of some entity. And chair, again, does not vote unless to break the tie. And chair, again, doesn't argue the position, just like an individual process, same thing. And the rest is the same thing. Now, something to remember that even though it's an entity project, even though there is a designated representative, which is one company, one vote, many people can participate from the same company. There's no limit to how many people from the same company can participate in the project. And of course, they will be recognized for in different situations, in discussions and brainstorming sessions, and they can really contribute. However, when it comes to vote, there will be one vote per company, per entity. So I would like to position standards activities in the IEEE as a whole. Where do we fit? How do we fit? And especially the angle here is standardization of emerging technologies, because we are operating in these initiatives and in most industry connection projects, we operate on an edge of technology, deal with emerging technologies. Not all, many are market relevant and market driven, etc. But emerging technologies and the major challenge for IEEE and the major focus, because it creates a problem, and I'll explain why. In the development process, attracting a qualified standard developers. So if you look at the technology and you split it in a simplistic way, in a kind of linear model, the conceptual phase, pre-competitive, competitive, and deployment. And so the conceptual concept is born, nobody knows what to do with it. Pre-competitive, yeah, you all have proof of concept already exists, so people know what to do with it, but they still don't come out of the closet. They operate in a closed regime, trying to become de facto standard, and then when they get, but however, people don't know how to make the money. There's no business model, right? So people trying to kind of figure out what they're going to do with it. But then when they figure out, and it becomes competitive, that's a different story. Now people think, okay, now we have to think business. And at that point, people start thinking standards. So typically we see standards proposal coming out from competitive stage, but not earlier, very rarely earlier. Now, for emerging technologies, IEEE tries to do it in the conceptual and pre-competitive stage in order to position IEEE in these technologies. So the intellectual property, the strength is very high in the beginning, right? If you invented it, you call it shots. You can patent the hell out of it. You can publish the hell out of it. You will be the most cited patents, the most cited paper. But then with time, it diminishes, right? Somewhere in competitive area, the strength goes down, and then it's not of interest to researchers. However, the relevance is going in the opposite way. A lot of technologies don't make it, and those of us who work for Bell Labs and Bellcore and IBM Labs, people know that you write a lot of patents when you are in a conceptual phase, and then many of them just don't make it because they didn't make it into standards, or they didn't make it into the industry. The marketplace didn't accept them. So these goes in anti-phase. Now, the researchers drop out with time, and practitioners pick up. So the handoff occurs somewhere in the pre-competitive phase and competitive phase. But what is important for IEEE is to position itself in emerging technology standards. So we would like to have standards very early, And in order to have standards very early, you have to compress this cycle. You have to bring in practitioners together with researchers and hand off as early as possible. Try to convince them, make them a value proposition and portray the feasibility of it. So compress, speed up the conceptual phase, move it into pre-competitive and competitive. So all arrows point to the left. Now, IEEE products are different on each phase of the technology evolution. First of workshops, if you know when technologies were born, you will know that they first occurred in our workshops, like communication workshop, for example. I mean, I've been to a workshop where ADSL was first spelled out, or coherent optical communication was first spelled out back in early 80s. Then come conferences. So those who are familiar with patent litigation, you know that conference papers show up much more often than, for example, publications, because people first publish in conference. So our conference are the first, the industry gives us the first shot at the intellectual property, and the first discovery, first disclosure of intellectual property occurs in our conferences, and then in publications. So, and then come standards, market-driven standards. But emerging technology standards are not market-driven, and they are market-driving. They are more disruptive. Very often, they're more disruptive than they are helpful to the industry. At least appear that way when they occur. For example, IETF SIP protocol back in who knows when, 90s. That was a very disruptive thing, and telcos didn't like it. Nobody liked it, and eventually it caused the redistribution of wealth more than Bolshevik Revolution. You know, some companies disappeared from the face of the earth in telco business because of that, right? So they're disruptive, but then they become mainstream. With time, they become mainstream. So it's a challenging proposition to operate conceptual phase when you are disrupting some industries or helping others. Of course, there are industries that pick you up, and there are some companies that have ambitions very early in the game because they put their money into the intellectual property and then live off it. And some companies not. They're followers or they're kind of early adopters, and they come on a wagon later. So the environment we have in IEEE, this is very important, and this is a kind of value proposition to researchers, why to go into standards and how we will support you. So emerging technology standardization, what you deal with on the bottom is all kind of industry alliance. Let's be close to them, you know, understand what's going on there, because that's a lot of ideas come from there. What you have on the left is, somebody needs to mute them. What you have on the left is typical technical activities environment, right? You have standards activities based in councils and societies and councils. You have TA conferences, technical activities conference. You have industry and standards events in IEEE SA and in other industry oriented societies and groups. You have technical activity clubs. You have standards, and you have a rewards. You have standards awards, and you have fellow elevation. And researchers about these things. And as a matter of fact, this year is the first year when a fellow category of standard contributor was approved by the board of directors, and we already had even 13 candidates in standards contributor category. So we do it for those who care about these things, who will come to us unless they get rewarded. Now, on the left of standards, that kind of governs standards activities in technical activities. Now, on the top, you have IEEE Standards Association. You have the Standards Board. You have SCSCOM. Those projects that do not find sponsor, this is very important for this RRSA. Let's say there is a topic that doesn't fit any of the technical societies in IEEE, then that projects can go to IEEE SA SGSCOM, Strategic and Emerging Standards Committee. It will take any project which is kind of in a field of interest of IEEE or even on the edge of field of interest of IEEE, but not in the field of societies, particular technical societies. Then you have industry connections. That's where raw or not ready to fly or almost ready to fly projects should go in order to get maturity to become a standards proposal. And then we have contributors collector. Our researchers need to get rewarded, need to have citable and discoverable contributions to standards. So today you can publish your contribution to standard as is on an IEEE SA contributions collector. It gets a digital object identifier. It can never be removed. It's your publication. You can reference it, and you can people can cite you, and those who authored the contribution to standards will be there as authors, not like 500 people like in some IEEE project. The group is big, and people that actually contributed the lion's share don't get recognized because they're mixed with the crowd. And then we have IEEE SA Felcom, which is a fellow nomination support committee that helps people to write nominations for standards contributors. On the right, you see future directives. So future directions initiatives have a rule now that there has to be a standards component in them, and it has to be included and funded. Now, of course, some may not include it if it doesn't. Don't see it fit. However, the FDC made sure that anybody who wants to include it should include it and can include it, and it will be adequately budgeted. So you see initiatives here which produced a lot of standards using RRSAs, starting from smart grid, IoT, blockchain. There was no RRSAs, quantum. SDN, NFP, and future networks. There are dozens and dozens of standards that were produced by RRSAs, and now public safety technology. It's a new initiative. So I don't know of any better ground for seeding ground for standards in emerging technologies than our future directions initiatives, because you get together experts in the field, and they can dream up the futuristic architectures, the roadmap and the vision. They come up with a vision for that particular technology, and after 5 years, it's already vision. Up to 5 years, it may be a roadmap, but after that, it's a vision. So they have a vision of technology, and they have standards ideas, and who, if not them, should be qualified to do it. So we have standards initiated by these initiatives. Industry picked it up on the fly. During RRSAs, we brokered a lot of marriages. A lot of people that you know got picked up by companies right at the RRSA when academics, for example, proposed some idea and a vision for a standard, and the industry liked it and didn't have anybody to develop them. They hired these academics on the fly. I can give you an example. The Green Touch Consortium and Jafar Amiglani, where they actually retained him, and he was in Great Britain at that time. I don't know where he moved somewhere now, but he was in Great Britain in university academic, and he ran and runs still today standards activities initiated by Green Touch Consortium, and they are in green ICT. And there are others where the companies picked up academics, gave them grants, or hired them as consultants. So this is the handoff mechanism. That's how it happens. Some companies gave money to IEEE to sustain an academic to run meetings in a working group that consortium was interested. So this kind of situation happens. And that's the most desired outcome, is to have a handoff into industry of an emerging technology and standardize it. So highlights of RRSA methodology. It's a brainstorming session. So we bring together industrial and academic researchers typically, and industry practitioners in a brainstorming of proposals for standardization, whether it's 5G and beyond, for Future Networks Initiative, or for the massive MIMO. We usually try to kind of focus it. And they parade their visions for the standard, and we're trying to assess how close is this to a standardization, and try to shape their thinking, introduce in their head some standards realities and desired modularization of the technologies for the purpose of standardization, etc. So this is kind of a brainstorming session with a mutual learning process where the researchers or practitioners give their ideas and standards experts feed them back what they hear, and thus comes out a standards proposal. So we welcome individuals with a strictly professed interest. Usually we fund their attendance of the RRSA session. SA was very good in this. Never they said no to us. We used FDC funds and IEEE funds to bring in those professed interest. Mostly they're academics or retired. Sometimes it happens that they are retired. To bring them in, and then, of course, they cannot be supported forever, but for the purpose of RRSA, for the purpose of proposal, they are funded to participate in RRSA session if we need them. So usually we solicit bids to participate in RRSA, and we select people based on these bids. This RRSA didn't have it, so we're gonna kind of do it on the fly, kind of weed out the proposals as we go. The hosting committee typically selects a limited number of people, so we could end up in a day with the standards proposal. And the possible outcomes are not necessarily PARS, even though it's the most desirable. It's the purpose. His only purpose is to produce PARS for IEEE standardization. But there could be not so ready projects. Can be research groups, for example, in industry connection, per se. There may be research groups in a society and council if they have an infrastructure for that. Study groups, that is already in a society, in a standards committee under IEEE SA auspices, and of course PAR proposals. So this is the flow. You identify a standardization item, but we go item by item. In the RRSA session, we decide, is it ready? Is it ready? Is it mature? Can we shape it? If it's ready, it goes straight through, and we work on the PAR proposal. It takes time. Sometimes it takes more than one session to work out a PAR proposal. But still, we say it's ready. It's ready. It's clear. They see. They have a vision. We go for the PAR. If it's not ready, it goes to research projects. Most probably, standards associations, industry connections. We highly recommend specifically that environment, because that environment is the closest that you get to the antitrust gathering, which preps you. It's kind of literacy course for the standardization. So this is the most desirable outcome for research. The direction is to go to industry connection. If it's almost ready to fly, we will recommend a study group in a specific standards committee. For both PAR or study group, you need already a standards committee. That's already SA. It goes into SA structure. So what are the major elements of the PAR? So you need a title. So if we produce a PAR today, so we would have to have a title. We kind of need a chair, at least as somebody has to sit for the chair, so we know who to contact for and who will be responsible for it. Standards committee. Sorry for the typo. We need to identify a standards committee. A standards committee with a proper scope. If we cannot identify it, we will we will do it later, but most of the time we kind of know. Those of us who have been seasoned in IEEE SA, we kind of know which society at least would have a standards committee for that. And you need a chair of standards committee in that PAR eventually, a sponsor society, of course, where the standards committee is resident. We have to decide, is it individual or entity? Will be represented by companies or represented by individuals? The scope of the standard, so that's a must have. So if we come out from RRSA with a PAR, scope and purpose would be highly desirable. But scope for sure, 100%, purpose is maybe 80%, need for a standard, maybe like 50%. You need to have the need for the standard, but you don't have to formulate it right away. But scope you do. If you can formulate the scope, you have it made, basically, because that's the key. So that's it. That's it on my part. I'll answer any questions.
Alex, thank you. So I think we'll open up the floor for any questions, or if you have anything, put in the chat. I have a question, Alex. So there are a number of successful parts that have emerged from many study groups, right? I think you mentioned about Smart City, Massive MIMO. And the typical process from RRSA to PAR is what, 3 to 6 months, you said? Something like that?
No. Study group, you don't need study group. Like in Open MIMO didn't have a study group. Open MIMO went from RRSA into a project. It didn't have a study group. Smart Cities also didn't have a study group. From RRSA, it went into the PAR. Examples of study group, I don't even know now. Like the last study group I was really involved was 1903 project, also 1901 project. That study group lasted, against all the rules of IEEE SA, it lasted more than 6 months. It lasted close to a year because of too much entropy. There were a lot of entities involved, and then they were at each other's throat. But it takes time. But
so
theoretically,
yeah, what you're telling is, go ahead.
Yeah, we can come out with a PAR today and start launch the project tomorrow.
So if the proposal is mature enough, right, you don't need to have a study group.
No.
Okay. right.
Study group is basically to formulate the scope. So this is why I said the scope. If you can formulate the scope, you don't need a study group.
I get your point. And this PAR measure elements, is it like a standard form you have that people have to fill out?
Yes, there's a on the web, right? But these are the major elements. I mean, there are other things there, but little things, But these are the major elements that you need to have with different priority, like the title and scope and the chair is a minimum.
And who actually approves based on so the chair of the standards committee has to take it forward, right? So
okay, so let me see. Let me show you here in this slide. Okay, so you initiate the project. You see on the left, you make a proposal to appropriate standards committee, right? And then approval of the PAR. After the standards committee approves it, it goes to NESCOM. It's new standards committee under SASB. Okay, and then the working group is being approved there as well. So they approve the PAR and they approve a working group. And then the working group has to come up with policies and procedures, which are approved by the standards committee. So that's the project initiation part, right? Before you're ready to develop the standards, go to draft development. You have to fulfill these 5 items.
Yeah.
You create the part, you go to NESCOM, NESCOM approves, you create the PNPs. The working group is already approved by NESCOM, right? But PNPs, they are on the hook to produce PNPs before they start the first technical meeting.
Yeah, this is clear, thank you. So there is a question on the chat. What is the group doing around quantum telecommunication? Is there any PAR around that, to the best
Yes.
of your knowledge?
So that part actually came out at the RRSA. Who from here? I remember Chatai being there, and I remember Chilin being there. So we were doing something else, and then and as a byproduct came out quantum communication standard. It's a software-defined quantum communication standard. Steve Bush, if you remember, he was the champion, and it was a product of that RRSA, which was kind of low-hanging fruit. Because prior to that, we had an RRSA and a project in nanoscale networking.
Yeah. So I guess if somebody has a new idea, so they have to bring it to one of these RRSA, and is the RRSAs like we just make it public to the world, right? How do we?
Okay, if somebody has a new idea, they can bring it to any standards committee they want. But if they have an idea and it's not shaped yet, and they want to make it into a standard proposal, then you need an RRSA. That's what RRSA is for, to help somebody to come up with a standards proposal out of idea. It's kind of professional services business, consulting business, right? We consult them how to, because not every idea is properly formulated by people that have not sufficient experience in IEEE standards. Sometimes they propose standards which are too big. Sometimes they propose standards which are too heterogeneous. So, you know, so you got to explain to them things, and then they still make the decision. RRSA will not make the decision for them, not the hosting team. No, people will make the decision, but you give them the options, and you give them the pros and cons of every option. You can have 5 standards out of this instead of 1. For example, I mean, you can have a basic architectural standard and then a group of spin-off standards. You come up with a, remember, like strategy, the first thing here, right? So they come with the idea, but idea is not necessarily fits into a PAR. Maybe the idea is entire vision for ORAN standardization, you know? Maybe the idea is a strategy and tactics for ORAN standardization. Maybe it has a bunch of opportunities. You got to kind of sort out these things.
Yeah,
At the end,
yeah.
At the end, you split the variables into individual parts and say, okay, now let's work on specific proposals.
So there are potential outcomes to a specific idea. That's what I see, right? It can lead to various different ways, and one of the is the most effective way to get a power, right? If right. So any other question, folks, on the call? Please put it in the chat. I can read it out, or if you want to ask, it's up to you how you want to do it. This is a chance for us to ask Alex any questions you have on the.
Yeah, I have my hand raised. Is just to check with Alex, because I've also been involved with another ICAID project, Nandika. I don't know if you heard of it, which is run under the IEEE 802. And yeah, well, I've been involved with that for a very long time, maybe 5 years. So what we did there on the comment from Alex was actually we wrote a technical report from what we wanted to do and explaining, and this technical report has including all the arguments, counter arguments, etc., and solution. And then from that technical report, we went on to produce a PAR into the IEEE 802.1 for an amendment. So is that something, I mean, does this similar here, things can be done, or is it different? ICAID has different approaches?
Well, you had a perfect path. I mean, look on the left, right? That's exactly what we want you to do, right? So if you have a very forward-looking idea, it's probably difficult to make it into a PAR, right? You need something like a vision document, a research report, right? A white paper. And then as an outcome, but when you do these things, you have to still target standardization proposal, right, for IEEE. So, and you did. So obviously, you did the right thing. If at
Yeah,
end
the technical
you can,
report or white paper, as you said, it was kind of collecting all the argument for and against and the vision about what are the problems, basically in more details, and what was the vision to solve these problems. And then we had a lot of discussion, and which from that report, actually, a lot of it went into the PAR that then gone through.
right, and I'm showing here, right? So research projects, you do research project, you can, during research project, you can go with some idea, which, you know, there are spin-offs, right? You're doing research, some of them, something is mature, something you're still working on, right? So in the middle, you can go into RRSA session and propose something, or at the end, it doesn't matter, right? So you do it iteratively, you keep going and produce, you can, while the life of research can be 5 years, you can produce 20 research projects, 20 standards projects during that 5 years. Just keep feeding them into RRSA session and come up with standards. Now, RRSA is kind of ComSoc, came out of ComSoc, we did it for Computer Society too, but every society has their own research. Now, 802 has their own research. They're a society within a standards committee, right? 802 is so big that they do their own research, which is okay. Great.
Yes, yeah, it's under the Computer Society, and the 802 committee itself has its own rules, etc. As what you call PNP, basically, applicable to the 802 committee, the LMSC or something. Yeah.
So you can have an equivalent RRSA, like shaping a project into shaping a proposal into a PAR. You do it inside there. That's fine. Doesn't matter. There are more than one.
To elaborate, the technical report or white paper, whatever, came out from the study period or study group, as you call it here on the right, and that actually took far more than 6 months. We worked on it for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and then when we went to approve it, because the NANDICA, the ICAID NANDICA under the 802 worked under the 802.1 working group, and when we come to approve the report, people become aware of it that we're not actually active in these past 2 years, and then we started again, like balloting and so on, what the user work group until we finally got it through, and from that then we spin into producing a PAR.
Hey guys, I have a hard stop at 10:30. This is
Okay,
chat
I
time.
think we should move to Chata. Alex, would you be able to stay for some time if we have questions come back?
I'm staying so far.